Good afternoon. I'm Christine Taylor Lewis, and on behalf of the Afro-American Historical Association of Fauquier County, I thank you again for your support and welcome you to this, our 20th, in a series of conversations with family historians and others who will share their genealogy research or provide information related to local African Americans and their history. Now, part of the mission here at AAHA is to collect, document, preserve, and share U.S. history with a special interest in African Americans in Fauquier County. We hope that these virtual events will remind you of the richness of our history and culture here in Fauquier. So we encourage you to visit our website at aahafauquier.org, where you will find a link to historical photographs, archives, books, artifacts, ongoing projects, as well as videos of our previous social media events. There's also a virtual tour of our museum, a link to news stories related to AAHA, an interactive story map of Fauquier communities, churches, and schools. There's a link to our newest online project called the Digital Map Center, and a link to the Morgantown School Project. So visit us at aahafauquier.org, where there's a wealth of information related to the African American experience in Fauquier County and nearby.
I have to go, I'll be back.
We also invite you to our Facebook page each Thursday for a brief history of the African American schools in Fauquier County. Lastly, and of great importance, don't forget to vote on or before November 8th. Please exercise your right to cast your ballot. Many of the polling places have been reassigned, so if you haven't voted already, be sure that you know where your polling place is or how to cast an absentee ballot.
I love you, sweetie.
The phone for the Fauquier office of the General Registrar is 540-422-8290. That's 540-422-8290. And if you live in another county, I'm sure that the Fauquier office will be able to direct you to the proper number. Thank you. Now, I met today's guest earlier this year when we hosted Michael Parker Sr., who spoke about his ancestors in Upperville and Paris. Our guest was among those who joined the conversation and shared about ancestors at Oakley Farm in Upperville. So after accepting our invitation for today's event, we visited the AAHA office, and I had the joy and pleasure of meeting this young man face to face. Joseph Roby is a genealogist and a member of the Association of Professional Genealogists. He lives in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He has always felt connected to Virginia, especially Northern Virginia, because of childhood visits to his paternal grandparents' home in Bluemont. He is currently working on a major research project entitled Enslaved at Oakley and Beyond. The goals of this project are to give a voice to the people held in bondage by his Dulany ancestors in Fauquier County, Virginia, as well as to find ancestors and living descendants of Oakley's enslaved community. In his spare time, Joseph enjoys Star Wars, baseball, and spending time with his family and his cat named Bella. Hello, Joseph.
Hello, Christine. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Indeed, it's an honor and a joy to see you again. You look well.
Same to you.
We have so much to cover, so what I'd like to do is to ask you a few questions about your genealogy, and then go to the chat room to see if there are any questions or comments there. Afterwards, we'll come back and talk to you more about your project. How's that?
Sounds good.
Okay, good, good. So tell us how you first became interested in genealogy and your family history.
Sure. So the paternal grandparents you mentioned in the intro, my paternal grandfather, Rochester Ross Roby, he was very into genealogy in his retirement years, and he traced both his family and my grandmother's family back as far as he could go, hundreds of years. So it's my paternal grandmother's family that goes way back in Virginia. But so I grew up with his big fan charts on the wall, which I will actually show a little bit later in my slides. And yeah, and I was about 10 or so when I finally just wanted to know a little bit more about those and started asking questions.
That sounds great. So the fan chart sounds fascinating. So I look forward to seeing it when you present it. So what are some of your family surnames, Fauquier?
Yeah, so obviously one is Dulany. That's who own Oakley. But some other common ones are Powell, Turner, Carter, Randolph, Armistead, and DeButts.
Okay. Randolph sounds familiar because at my church at Mount Pisgah in Upperville, we had a deacon who worked for Mrs. Theodora Randolph, I believe her name was, for about 50 years. And they developed a very, very close bond. And the DeButts family was a very dear friend and still is, of the Mount Pisgah Church. So those two names ring out right away. But can you tell me more about your ancestor Civil War journal that you talked about?
Sure, yeah. So that was really the so after learning a little bit about my family history, seeing the fan chart, I also got really interested in Civil War history. Okay. And then when my grandfather showed me that we had an ancestor who wrote all about the Civil War, that really got me interested in both history and genealogy. That was really what got me very, very obsessed in both history and genealogy. But so my third great grandmother is Ida Powell Dulany. Her journal was published in 2009, so you can go buy it in a bookstore on on any online retailer. And so she wrote not only about the daily life in this region in northern Fauquier County, but she wrote so much about the life of the enslaved people. Even if she didn't mean to do it, that's what she did. She mentioned so many names and people and just how daily life was. So and then the journal, unfortunately, there's only one original part left. That's in the Virginia Historical Society. Now it's the Virginia Museum of History and Culture. And there are still typescripts of the other parts, but yeah.
So then how you actually related to Ida Powell Dulany? How was it in your family line? Or how is she besides your third grandmother, great grandmother?
Yeah. So my dad, Nicholas Roby, and then my grandfather, Rochester Ross Roby.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. My grandmother, Juliet Carter Dulany. She was born in Washington, D.C., but spent summers at Oakley.
Okay.
And then her father was Henry Rozier Dulany,
Hmm.
and her father was another Henry Rozier Dulany.
Okay.
And that Henry Rozier was the son of Ida Powell Dulany.
Hmm. So are there other Dulanys in this area that you're related to? Or?
Yeah, I'm pretty much
Yes.
related to every Dulany in this area, but the closest relation and most well-known are the Dulanys of Welburn. There's also a book and
Okay.
letters about them. I'm related to them in multiple ways because they like to intermarry with one another.
Oh, they did. Yeah.
So cousins marrying cousins.
Hmm.
Yeah, so Ida's husband, his sister, Rebecca Dulany, married her cousin, Richard Dulany. And those were the Dulanys of Welburn.
Okay. This is Weber. Yeah. So does any of your family still live at Oakley?
No, it was passed down through the sons, the Dulany sons. So the last family member to own it was my great uncle, and that was Benjamin Weems Dulany. And it was sold, I believe, in the late 50s. It was sold long before I was born. I've never seen it.
Okay.
It was, and when you mentioned the Randolphs, the Randolphs were the next owners of Oakley.
Okay.
So I think it was the same Randolphs actually. And then I believe after that, it's the current owners of Oakley, which is the Bonnies.
Yeah, Shelby.
Yeah, Shelby Bonnie. But I haven't been able to get in touch with him yet and get a chance to get in there.
So I believe Shelby Barney is Mrs. Randolph's grandson, I believe.
Oh, okay.
As I mentioned, the deacon, Melvin Warren at our church, established a very close bond with him as well after Shelby's grandmother passed.
Okay.
So do you have any other relatives you'd like to tell us about?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm going to mention the Carters a little bit later in the talk, so I'll skip that for now. I'll also mention, since your office is in the Plains, that I have some Turner relatives who were who live near and around the Plains in Kinloch.
Oh, okay.
That farm. And there's actually an enslaved woman who is buried there who has she died in the 1880s, I believe. And she has her own stone and everything and is buried with all the Turner relatives. Her name is Wilhelmina Edmonds.
Her name again?
Wilhelmina Edmonds.
Wilhelmina.
Yeah.
So aren't you related descendant of the Powells?
Yes.
Of Middleburg?
Yes. So because Ida Powell Dulany, her father was a Powell. And then those Powells go back to Levin Powell, who was one of the founders of Middleburg. And Allison Herring, who's on this call, who's a friend of mine and fellow researcher. She has been very helpful. And she's also done a lot of the similar research that I've done, but on a certain Powells, and they're enslaved too, especially a woman named Ariana. And I know AAHA has some of her research too, and can look forward to what she has coming out.
We had the joy, at least I did, of meeting Allison earlier this year as well.
Yes.
And it turns out in her research, searching for Ariana, it was discovered that Ariana is an ancestor of one of my cousin's husbands, Reverend Mark Lewis. Yeah.
Okay.
That was fascinating. That was interesting. Mhm. So then I can see how you're so interested in this area because many of your ancestors were landowners here.
Yes.
Yeah, and many had enslaved. So we thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Can you tell us why you began to do the research that you're doing on the enslaved?
Sure. Yeah. It was kind of a long road to
I can imagine.
to getting here, but it was a lot of it was just chance and things that just happened. But I would say one of the last things to happen that really pushed me to really go into it was finding the Dulany family Bible that was at Oakley.
Yeah.
And then I had no idea one that existed. And when I was going through the pages that had family birth and marriage and death dates, then I turned to another page that I thought was going to be family birth, and all of a sudden it said Oakley servants, and it had their births and names and a lot of other stuff. So I'm going to show some photos of those and go through that a little bit later. Yeah, so that really pushed me into it. But a little bit before, I had done some research. I volunteered for a historic site outside Philadelphia and researched. I had helped organize a slavery exhibit and done some of the background research for it. So that was some good practice.
Yes, yes. So I can imagine the excitement you felt when you saw the Bible. And there were the names that you were looking for. right in your
well, actually, at the time, I wasn't really looking for them, but I noticed when I found them, I remembered the names from Ida's journal.
Right.
I found a lot of the names I knew.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I can imagine how exciting that was.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at the chat and see if there's anyone who has any questions. Feel free to chime in with your comments or questions.
Or let him do his presentation already.
I'm sorry. Hello. Oh. Okay, so I don't see any questions so far. So we'll move on to your project about the enslaved at Oakley. Can you describe what the project is all about for us?
Sure. Yeah. So my main goals with the project are to, one, just to go beyond the given names that I found that are in the Bible and just the brief mentions in Ida's journal, and to find those people mentioned in at least the 1870 census and to find them somewhere else. And I also want to flesh out their family tree. I want to find their whole families. I also want to, if possible, find their ancestors. I want to go back further into slavery and find as many of their ancestors as possible. I also very much want to find any living descendants so I can share any information that I have with them and connect with them. I have managed to do that a little bit, which has been wonderful. I've been able to connect with a few people.
Yes.
And that's just been so amazing and rewarding to do that. And they have shared information with me that I didn't have, which has also been wonderful. And then I hope to at some point publish. I don't know what format it's going to take at this point, either a book or a website or both or something, but whatever it is, it's going to be accessible to everybody, so everybody can see it. And I'm not going to profit off of it in any way.
Yes. I can see that you have a genuine interest,
Yeah.
Sincere interest in finding out about the enslaved there at Oakley.
Right.
Among the Dulany's. So are there some surnames that you came up during the course of your research?
Yeah, so the main surnames were Buckner, Burrell or Burrell, depending how you want to pronounce that, Coleman, Edmonds, Evans. I'm going in alphabetical order. Haynes,
yes,
Hedgeman,
yes,
Jackson, Marshall, Neal, Nickens, Peters, Syfax, and Willis. And of course, there are many more, but those are the main ones right now.
So have you focused on any of those in particular? I know Eli Coleman and Miles Hedgeman were trustees when our church was purchased.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So my next trip down, I need to.
Oh,
I need
okay.
to talk with you about the Mount. About your church record. So the church histories. I mean, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I've been focusing a little bit more on the Willis family. That's kind of where I started out because I knew there was some more information about them, and because the Henson Willis, because because Willisville was founded.
Okay.
It was named after him, so I knew there was more information about him, so I kind of started there and worked my way out.
So these are the names of people that you will show us in your presentation.
Yes.
You'll talk some about Willisville, will you?
Yes.
Okay. So tell us about what have been the most helpful resources that you've used in putting together your project.
Yeah, so I'm going to go over a few of them in the presentation, but I'm not going to mention a lot of them. So just again, very briefly, I know I've been helped by Kevin Grigsby's 2 books, the one on Howardsville and the one on the Loudon Civil War soldiers, African-American Civil War soldiers. I've been helped tremendously by church records, especially the ones at the Thomas Balsh Library. I've been helped by, of course, AAHA. Can't forget you guys. Been helped a lot by the Freedmen's Bureau. I'm going to go into that a little bit. Freedmen's Bureau. I mean, I could go on for a very long time, but that's just a very brief.
Yeah. Excellent resources, for sure. And I imagine you would tell us also the tools that you use as well.
Yeah, so I actually I'm going to throw some links in the chat maybe at the end. But one tool I definitely did want to mention was WikiTree. I don't think a lot of people really know about it. I know I didn't know about it until a few years ago. They have a project which I'm a member of called the U.S. Black Heritage Project, and they are and there's, as a part of that, there's the Heritage Exchange Program, which is, I'm going to read it right from the thing because I'm a collaboration between descendants of slave owners, descendants of those enslaved, and the U.S. Black Heritage Project in order to document those who were enslaved. And one of the goals of the project is to make WikiTree the go-to source for African-American family trees.
Good.
So I believe there's close to 200,000 profiles of African-Americans.
Is that right?
So you really have to make that a stop. It's just as much as Ancestry and Family Search.
That's right. Yeah. Now that people are so much more interested, it seems more and more interested in finding out their heritage and their ancestry. There's so many new programs that have come about to help in that search. So this is a good one to have, particularly for African Americans. So we thank you for that resource. So do you want to show us your PowerPoint? Or
sure.
do you have something else you'd like to share first?
No, I think that's good, unless there's any other, unless there's somebody has something in the chat, but I don't. I think I'm good to go. Okay.
Awesome.
All right. We all set? Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we see it. Yes.
Okay. We can take a sip of water. Okay. I will say, if there aren't a note or a citation at the bottom of the screen, I probably couldn't fit it. So if anybody wants to know what a photo or a document is, my email address is going to be at the end. I'll say it at the end too. So if you want to know what something is, just contact me and I'll let you know what it is. Okay. All right. So real quick, we went over a lot of my personal family history, but I just want to share. This is my grandfather and I in Bluemont. And I always loved riding on his tractor. I have very fond memories of that. And then this is me a few years ago up in Massachusetts this is ancestor Joseph, another Joseph Roby, who was a patriot during the American Revolution. They saved a tree stump that he planted in 1776.
Oh, wow.
So,
that's beautiful.
And this is the fan chart that I talked about earlier. So this is just one of two. This is my grandmother's side. This is the Dulany side.
Okay.
Or the Dulanys are part of this. The Dulanys are at the very bottom. And he even had to go up on the very far left and squeeze in Dulanys because they went back so far.
Wow.
And so you see, this is a zoomed in portion of the people I'm concentrated on. Yep, Henry Grafton Dulany, Ida Powell, whose real full name is Mary Eliza Powell. And then we got some Carters and other names too. And here's photos of Henry Grafton Dulany, Mary Eliza, Ida Powell Dulany. And we got a photo of Oakley. And then here's the published version of the diary. And this is the index. You can see just how many names there are in the index of it's under Oakley slaves. And it's amazing how many mentions and there are, and it's really a wealth of information. All right, I already talked about that, so I'm gonna skip over that. And then here are the Bible pages.
Yes.
So again, these are, it's under, this is just in the Bible among my family, and I estimate that this was written in 1860 because there's two birth years of 1860 in here. There's nothing later. So I assume this was written in preparation or for the 1860 census, the slave schedule. But I can't prove that. And this was written in Ida's handwriting. That I do know. So she wrote this. And there are 80 names in here. And on the second page on the far right is Henry Grafton in 1870 swearing, says, "I do solemnly swear that I will not take a drink of anything but water or coffee or tea or any for any time 5 years from this date." And it's August 17th, 1870. He had problems drinking,
Okay.
especially after the war. So that would eventually lead to his death years later. But anyway, that's what's over there. But yeah, so it's basically a page and a half of names, and it's really amazing. So the title is Oakley Servants. It was very common for the white people to use the word servants back then. That they rarely use the word slave. It means slave. It doesn't mean indentured servants or anything. It means enslaved persons. So this was one thing that was very interesting when I really studied it, was that a lot of these people on here were grouped by families. So here's just one. It has a mother, it has her birth date, and then it would say children, and then it would list all her children. So this has been extremely helpful for research and very helpful in finding people. So I've learned after more research that this is the Coleman family.
Yes.
Fortunately, I don't know Wilma's maiden name yet, anyway. But this is the Coleman family, and the father, I believe, at least of most of these children, is Alfred Coleman, who I also believe is the same Alfred Coleman who was owned by the Powells at Llangollen, and that ties into some of Allison Herring's research.
Yeah.
So, all right, then we have the first person written is Old Tom, about 1777, so during the Revolutionary War, which is amazing to think about. And this is the 1860 slave schedule. According to the directions for the census enumerators, if they found someone who was 100 years or older, they had to write their name, even though everybody else just got a tick mark. So when they went around, somebody said that Old Tom was 100 years old, so he was born in 1760 according to the census. So the years are off a bit, but I'm sure this is the same person. So that's pretty. So he was born somewhere between 1760 and 1777, probably. And then Walton at the bottom of the page here. This is a part of the Bible where there aren't any family groupings. There's just a lot of individuals listed, which also makes me think that these people were torn away from their families at some point because they don't have, their mother is not here. So Walton is in the 1860 slave schedule, and he's 4 years old, but in the in one of the columns it says idiotic Walton. So they were also supposed to note if someone had, you know, what we would call like a mental disability or even a physical disability, they were supposed to note that. And I don't know if they were supposed to write a name. I don't think they were supposed to write a name, but they did. And I can confirm they have the birth year right too. That's the same person. And I have not been able to find Walton, unfortunately, after this. So I don't know what happened to him. And here is Lucinda and her family. Lucinda is the wife of Henson Willis. So this is
okay.
So Lucinda, born 1828, Sims, born 1859. So keep a mental note for a little bit of Sims, because I'm going to come back to Sims. So I'm not going to read all this, but just, this is from Ida's journal. In November of 1864, the Union Army was in the area around Upperville, and Henson Willis, who was free, he wasn't enslaved. He was possibly working for the Union Army. I'm not sure about that, but one day he came with some soldiers and said that he was taking his family from Oakley. And of course, Ida being Ida, if you know her from reading her journal, she said no, you're not taking your family. But so eventually Ida got arrested, taken into the Union camp. And
is that right?
Yeah, but one thing that's great about her writing all this is, like on this page, it says, you know, Harriet insisted on going with Lucinda. And let's see, at first they must take old blind Polly with them. Harriet consented as Aunt Polly was her relation. That's very helpful. But Lucinda positively refused to take bedridden Wilmeth. I think that's the Wilmeth from before, who was a Coleman. So she said, but Lucinda positively refused to take bedridden Wilmeth, who was her relation, with her. So now Lucinda's related to Wilmeth. So there's just a lot of this, you know, she's just casually mentioning this in here, but it can be very, very helpful in the research. So she gets arrested, she gets let go, but Henson and his family get captured by Mosby's men, probably. Anyways, I can't find a record that states that besides Ida's journal. But Henson and his family don't show up at the Union camp safe and sound. So she gets arrested and she eventually gets released. But and they, you know, they wind up fine in 1870, but I don't know what happened to them in between. And this is Henson Willis in Loudoun County personal property tax in 1869. Shout out to Lori Kimball at the Loudoun County Courthouse for helping me get this record. I know it's very blurry. but Henson Willis is living on Townsend Seaton's land. He has 3 hogs worth $10. He has $25 worth of gold, silver plate, or jewelry for a total of $35. So just to give you a little sense of what.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So here's the Sims I wanted you to remember. This is, I believe this is the same person. Daniel Sims Willis. This is Henson and Lucinda's son. This is in the New York Age, African American newspaper in Brooklyn. And this is his obituary. It even mentions, obviously a great, a photo of him, and in the second column there, it says his father's Hanson or Henson Willis. The birth date's a little off from the Bible, but that's very normal. It gives his mother, Lucinda Willis. I get brothers, I get sisters. There's so many names in here. I still haven't gone through everybody here and researched them. It's just a gold mine of information. And here is the Willis family tree that I've started. So, and it goes much more. This is just the top of it.
No.
And then this is the Peters family. So for some reason, there's only one surname written in the Bible, and that's Peters. There's a lot of Peters written.
Yes.
So I'm going to focus on Eliza Peters on the top arrow here, who was born by 1807, and then Billy, born about 1836. So I found a William J. Peters in the Freedmen's Bank records in 1867 was his date of application. It says name of master, Henry Grafton Dulany, name of mistress, Ida. We get a height and complexion. He's not married, no children. He doesn't look like he was in this war. Look, he fought this. The place of birth is very interesting. Bluff Point, Virginia. I didn't know what Bluff Point, Virginia was. Residence, Loudon, farmer, post office, and the very last one, my mother, Eliza Peters, is authorized to withdraw my account. And then he signed it, which was also great to see that he could probably read and write. So that was great. But then going back to the Bluff Point, so I had no idea where Bluff Point was. So I had to do a lot of digging. And one of the things I did was go through my family tree to see, okay, well, where did my family own land that maybe the Peters family, maybe my family owned the Peters going back into time. So I looked back on the Carters, because Henry Grafton Dulany, his mother was a Carter, and going back, so his grandfather was Landon Carter. Landon Carter's great grandfather was Robert King Carter. And if you know a little bit about Virginia history, Robert King Carter owned at one point like 2/3 of Virginia. He had was yeah, I could go for a long time talking about him, but we're not going to talk about him now. So anyway, so I finally figured out that Landon Carter owned a plantation called Bluff Point in Northumberland County, Virginia.
Which county?
Northumberland. Northumberland County.
Oh, okay.
So here's Landon Carter's inventory from his probate. This is in Richmond County in 1820. So a list of slaves belonging to the state of Landon Carter, Esquire, deceased at Bluff Point in Northumberland County. So it even breaks it down by, he had, I think there were 3 or 4 plantations, and this is the Bluff Point one. So, and it even breaks it down by, I'm assuming, family. So I noticed there's a few Billies in here.
Yeah.
Again, you know, the names are very common, but, and then on another page, I find a Wilmoth who is 8 years old, and that is very close to the age that the Wilmoth and
That's right.
the bio, that's very close to the Oakley Wilmoth. That makes sense. So but again, she is not, it's possible her maiden name is Peters, but I don't know that for sure. But anyway, a lot of this is connected, but I haven't been able to find, haven't been able to definitively find either Eliza or Billy at Bluff Point, but still working on that. But here is the town of Peter. And
Yes.
now we're going to the Coleman Hedgeman family tree. So at the very top is Alfred, and it says Matilda, but that's another name for Wilmoth. She, in a lot of the later records, her children refer to her as Matilda. And I have it as Myers Hedgeman. He's also listed as Miles.
Yes.
He's also Richard Myers.
Richard M. Right.
Richard Hedgeman. He had a lot of names.
Yes.
Person. He also fought in the Civil War with the 29th Connecticut, which was a U.S. colored troop regiment. And real quick, this is AAHA's website, if you're not familiar. To find a little bit about Myers/Miles Hedgeman, I went to their homepage. I clicked on interactive map. I did church here. I went to the number 2, which is the Mount Pisgah Baptist Church, which is at the very northern end of Fauquier.
Okay.
And you can see we got founding trustees and members. Miles Hedgeman and Eli Coleman is a brother-in-law.
That's right. Yes.
Of Miles. So,
Yes.
and there are lots of other names. There's Charity, surname Tebb is another one that comes up a lot. Adams, yep. Howard,
Yes.
Summer, yeah. There's so many. Turner.
Amazing.
So,
Just amazing.
okay, so again, I'm not going to read all this. I don't know how we're doing on time, but we're getting close to the end. This is Elias. This is the Marshall family. So this is from the Freedmen's Bureau. This is a letter written by a friend, basically, of his, because he can't read or write. This is actually, it's 157 years ago today, October 25th. 7 years, yeah, 157 years ago today. He is writing to say he formerly belonged to the widow, Mrs. H.C. Edmonds, and his wife and 4 children belonged to Mr. Henry Dulany, which is Oakley. And he left home and went to Alexandria, Virginia during the war, which is very common, and worked for the government, again, very common for for formerly enslaved people to flee there during the war. And he says he has returned, and he found out that his family was sold by the Dulanys to a Sampson T. Bailey in Fauquier, and then were sent south to Lynchburg. And he's trying to find his family, but he also found out that Mr. Bailey told his wife and kids that he was dead in order to convince his wife to bound out their children to him. So his wife consented because she thought he was dead, and she would, but she said that she would pay the expenses by her services to get back to the Upperville area, but he refused. So it says she's almost entirely exhausted of supplies. And then and having a large family to provide for, she consented to buying the children in order to get back to her native county and to the Upperville area. So that was in July of 1865. He's finding out in October, and he's trying to he's writing to the head of the Freedmen's Bureau, Major General Oliver Otis Howard, who eventually Howard University is named after. And yeah, so he's writing to appeal that he needs his family back. And he tried already with the Warrenton, Virginia office, and they said, sorry, can't help you. So this is in 1867 now, he's still trying. And I'm going to blow this up. This lists his children and their ages. So we got Georgiana Marshall, 15 years of age, Elias, 12, James, 10, and Samuel, 7. And again, it kind of goes into the same thing that I just said. It says he is abundantly able to support his family and educate them.
Oh, this is cool.
And he is particularly anxious to get them. He further states that Mr. Bailey beat his wife about 3 weeks since with a horsewhip. So there's still, this is well after the Civil War, and there's still things like this going on. So there's definitely urgency to get his family back.
Yes.
So there's a little bit of good. I don't know exactly what happened. I can't find a resolution in the Freedmen's Bureau records to this. However, a couple of years later in 1870, the family's back together with 2 more children. So there's John and William. So we have Elias, Rosetta's wife, Georgiana, Elias, James. I think that says Simon, so it might have been Samuel, Simon. I think it's Simon, John, and William. And then Mariah, I think, is probably Elias's mother. And they're all living together.
So it's a happy ending to that story.
So yeah, I think a happy ending. And they're in my tree, and I've been able to trace them pretty close to the present. Elias's grandson, the son of Elias Jr., actually is buried at Arlington National Cemetery. He served in World War I. And was decorated, if I'm not mistaken. And here's the 4 children who were in there.
Yeah. Oh.
And that's it. So thank you everyone for your attention, especially thank you to Christine.
Yes, thank you.
AAHA. And here's my email address. And if anybody has any further questions, and my blog too has even more information that I'm talking about today. And yeah, thanks everybody for your attention.
So we thank you so much. I have just one question real fast.
Sure.
Did you do a family tree for the enslaved that you found?
Yeah, yes, I have
For
a,
those
it's,
families, you have a family tree for those families?
yeah, it's one big tree. I
Okay.
didn't do a separate tree for every,
Right.
it's one big tree, so they're, I have it
That's
on,
awesome.
it's a private tree now on Ancestry because
Okay.
I have, I'm still playing around with things and I don't
Yeah.
want
I understand.
uncertain I don't want things that I don't know are true
That you
to
can't
be
confirm.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's
So I'm very
marvelous.
willing to share it with any things
Mhm.
or relative. You know, I'm very, very willing to share it with any of those people.
Okay. Let's check the chat. Interesting to hear about the Randolph internal connections. The sister of my great grandfather. This has come from Randy Ruffin. A sister of my great grandfather, Mary Randolph, married a Turner and lived at Kinloch. She grew up, as did my great grandfather and his brother, Buckner Randolph. Another name that you mentioned. William and Beverly grew up at Eastern View in Casanova. Interesting.
Yeah, no, it's very. I don't think I've heard of Buckner as a first name, but that is very. Yeah.
And Dean Henry wants to say it was a great presentation. Leslie Grayson, do you have any insight into where so many enslaved would have lived at Oakley? 80 people there. There must have been a village.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't know exactly. I have a few I have a few theories of what I've read and seen. So I would imagine there were at least a few buildings on Oakley's property.
Yes.
I haven't been on Oakley's property, so I can't say. I don't think the buildings survive today. Let's put it that way. But I would be curious if any foundations or anything survive where you could tell if there's anything left. Also, what's Oakley right now, I believe, is only 200 some acres, and what was Oakley in the 1860s was 800 or 900 acres. So
Okay.
I also have read that a lot of the slave cabins, were where Willisville is today, and the enslaved people traveled. They walked back and forth to wherever they were enslaved every day.
That's right. That's right.
So that's possible too. I would assume that was the case for the field hands, the farm people worked outside.
That's right.
But I don't know for sure.
That's an excellent theory. Yeah, Willisville is in close proximity. And when you consider all the acreage.
Yeah, I can't take credit for that theory. That's that was Jane Covington's theory in the Willisville nomination form document.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Joe Hunter says it was great research, Joseph. Thanks for sharing. Karen White, great job. Definitely interested in the family tree. Always interested in family papers having names of the enslaved. 1860 slave schedule will give the number of